Good morning, Conversation 2. It is a lovely fall day today. It looks like we're going to have spectacular weather all week with blue sky and our holiday as well. So, this is going to be a short little lesson as a prelude to your vacation during Chuseok. I want to remind you I do not work for the Ministry of Health. I just think be careful. There's going to be a lot of people enjoying the weather, a lot of people going out. I went out too last weekend. It was lovely. Just stay in small groups, social distance, wear your masks when you're inside, and wash your hands all the time. And we won't have a problem. Everything's going well right now, and fingers crossed, going into October, things will continue this way. Anyway, just to be safe, we are continuing our online lectures. We're going to do a couple recorded lectures again, and then back on Zoom with you again. Now, let me talk about the Zoom lecture first. I was happy with some of the elements of the Zoom lecture. Obviously, there were some people that had poor connections and didn't have working microphones, which you need to fix. But generally, the atmosphere wasn't too bad, and I got to see some faces and have some brief conversations with people. The next time we do the Zoom lecture, I think we'll stretch it out a little bit longer. I don't want to take a break because I feel like if I take a break, you guys will disappear and I won't get your attention back. What I would like to say, though, is try to prepare yourself at least in the basic sense for class. So, don't be sitting in a cafe where there's lots of noise and you have a bad Wi-Fi connection. That's not appropriate for class. You need to be somewhere quiet where you can concentrate and we can hear you and you can hear us. The breakout groups, some of them were excellent. It all depends on the group, which is the same as in class. So that's, I guess, some things never change. And that's kind of heartening to me to see that things are the same on Zoom as they are in real life. Some groups were just chatting away, sharing, learning about each other, introducing, staying on topic, practicing their English, and some other groups were dead silent. If you were in one of those groups that were dead silent with their cameras off and their microphones muted, and I came in there, I already explained to you, the only people that you're hurting there is yourself. I can't judge participation as well as normal. So when I come in there and you're not doing anything, really you're just giving yourself a disadvantage. I'm not going to start docking marks for people who do that, but if you end up being one of those people who is constantly missing Zoom lectures or can't speak or can't participate properly, we're supposed to have 5 Zoom lectures, including the interview by the end. I am going to start keeping track of who is able to participate and who doesn't, because I think that's valuable and that's normally a part of the class. So don't worry about last class, but make sure you have your earphones connected to your phone, if that's your best device, or if you're on a computer, make sure you have a headset or everything's working so that we can have a more productive class. Because really the Zoom lecture is to field questions from you, but to have a chance to interact with me and each other. Okay? And please don't be shy. Everybody's got to take a turn, and I don't think anybody is really hogging the microphone. So there's lots of open mic time for you to say something. When I ask a question, only a few people speak up. So you can put your hand up, or you can signal me, or when we're in the breakout groups, you can talk some more. It would be good for you. Now, everybody's handing in their assignments. It was assignment number 3 that you were handing in today and tomorrow. Several students asked about feedback, and I said, if you're really in a hurry for feedback, you can send me a personal email and ask what you would like to ask. Professor, what do you think about, even a certain assignment? Could you give me some feedback on, I'm not sure about my grammar, or what's my major weak point? Can you tell me something like that? that's not a problem. I can do that. But like I said, I'm sort of waiting for all of them to come in, and then I'm going to go through them all at once. And then I'm going to email each student. All 65 of you are going to get an email to let you know your strong points and weak points before you go into the midterm. Okay, so that you're able, a couple weeks before the midterm, you'll get the feedback. So you'll have an idea of what you need to work on. Okay. In the meantime, like I said, general feedback, grammar is always the biggest issue. So I've been I've been pointing out grammar lessons at the beginning of every lecture that we've recorded, and the one in the Zoom lecture too. There is a page of grammar in every chapter, and it's important that you use that grammar lesson and apply it, right? When I give you those examples and then we give you the topic, usually you can use that grammar lesson in your topic. If you're not, then you simply have to look at your sentence and see how it's different than the one in the book or the examples that I'm giving, right? So last time we were talking about priorities in life, which involved a lot of habits. And for talking about habits that you've been doing, for a while and you're still doing them now, the appropriate tense is the present perfect or the past perfect. So the grammar lesson and the topic fit together well. So keep that in mind. I expect you to show that use of grammar when it's appropriate. Vocabulary and other things, and syntax and other things are harder to catch. Pronunciation, I can't give you any feedback on until we do the midterm. And that was one of the biggest disadvantages of not having a Zoom lecture or having midterm last semester, was that the pronunciation was 20% of the evaluation on your exam, but there was no opportunity for me to show you, demonstrate pronunciation or correct your pronunciation, except for me to model it by my own pronunciation. And my pronunciation is a certain Canadian-ish, expat sort of teacher accent. It's not necessarily the exact way you have to say words, but I suppose if you were going to try and improve your pronunciation without actually interacting with me, trying to sound like me would be fine. But certainly it is better for us to have an interview at the midterm and for you to find out that there's certain sounds that you need to work on when I evaluate that. So that's all the house cleaning we need to talk about. Let's get into this week's topic. I always say, whenever I say the lecture is going to be short, I end up making a longer one. So we'll see how it goes. The grammar lesson for chapter 4, which is our current one. We're on week 5, remember, but chapter 4. So this will be assignment 4, and it will be due next Monday and Tuesday. The title is Do You Know a Good Story? And I've entitled this lecture Storytelling, because this is essentially what I'm going to ask you to do for your homework. And I think this is probably the most open topic and probably the most fun topic, most flexible and most fun topic to make a conversation about, because human beings love stories. They have a structure and they have an easy way of helping other people understand how you feel and where you're from. And there's just a lot of identification that goes on when you are a person that tells a story. And it piques all sort of feelings of curiosity and emotion from other human beings. So all human beings love good stories, right? For various reasons. Everybody has their own idea of what a good story is, but everybody loves stories. So to write a good story, or to tell a good story, you need to, when you speak, add a little bit of emotion, a little bit of tone. Sometimes when people are talking, whether they're lecturing or whether they're reading a book, especially if it's not their first language, they tend to have sort of a unvaried rhythm. They just have a sort of regular rhythm that almost sounds like a machine is punching out words. And the tone in those words is not varied. So in Korean, there tends to be, when Koreans speak sometimes, especially when they're being serious, it tends to flatten out. and not to have as much inflection and tone variance as in English. It depends on the language how much you need. You might find in certain languages it's almost too much, like they're just constantly expressing themselves too much and they're exaggerating and the voice is going up and down and the tone is changing. But that kind of voice is appropriate in certain situations. For example, my favorite example has got to always be the Spanish soccer player announcer. You know, there's so much energy going into their speech that it just becomes a different kind of description. It involves so much energy, excitement, and tone change and ups and downs that it almost sounds like you're watching a more exciting game. It could be a really boring game, but the Spanish announcer has the ability to make it sound like it's the final of the World Cup. So when you're speaking, you got to sometimes vary the speed, the inflection, and the tone of your speech in order to make it more interesting. You notice this when you talk to somebody who's younger than you. Like if you read a book to a little kid and you just say, "The cat slowly walked up to the door. The door opened." Or you say, "The cat slowly walked up to the door and it opened. What's inside, kids?" Okay, you don't need to talk like that, but do you know what I mean? That's a totally different level of interaction. And even though you're university students, you probably started to tune out, or you probably start to tune out as I do these lectures. You start to tune out, but when I start talking like that, suddenly you're paying attention again. So this is part of the art of storytelling, if you're speaking as well, is that volume and variance in speeds and tone that makes a story more interesting. Okay, so before we get into any more of sort of the basic structure of a story, which is very simple, obviously. Everybody knows what a story is composed of, but let's just talk about the grammar for a second, because you're going to tell me a very short story. It's only going to be about 2 minutes long, so it's really going to be like something happened to me the other day, right? Or this happened when I was younger. It's just like a little episode. Some students in the past have said, "Professor, am I just talking about an episode?" Sure, if you want to call it an episode. It's a really compact story. It's a skit, it's an episode, or maybe you just want to call it a scene. It's just one moment, one short event, okay? Or part of an event. So normally this thing that you're talking about, this story, has already happened. So you're going to use the past tense, right? And you've got options here, whether you're going to be affirmative, positive, or negative in asking a question. So you got to start your story somehow, and sometimes, you know, something's already happening, so then you want to interrupt that event. So instead of saying, "Last night I ate dinner," you're going to say, "I was eating dinner last night when my phone rang." So instead of saying, "Last night I ate dinner," "I was eating dinner last night when my phone rang." And that's, you know, the jump. So you're just talking about last night, nothing really was happening. And then the trigger for the beginning of the story in this scene is first you set the scene, eating dinner, and then something triggers the beginning of the story, which is the phone call. And then after the phone call, right, I ran to the phone, I picked it up, and it was my brother. He was stranded this actually happened to my brother, should be careful. He's stranded in Thailand, and somebody had stole his wallet and his passport. So he needed some documentation sent from Canada. Okay, that's just, you can go off in any direction. The phone, I picked up the phone, and it was my best friend, and he said, "Hurry up. We're having a birthday party to celebrate my cousin's birthday, and this is coronavirus now, so you can only participate over Zoom. Get on Zoom right now and join the party." Maybe the phone call isn't the way you want to start. the story. It doesn't really matter. It can be triggered by any event, right? You could say, yesterday I did my homework. Or you can say, last night I was doing my homework when I heard some sirens outside. I ran to the window and there were 3 fire trucks coming up to the Chungnam Library and it was on fire. Okay, I'm just making up these random events. But what you really want to do is tell a real story. It's actually quite hard to come up with a story, as you can see, to come up with a story on the spot without actually preparing one. So you're probably going to want to think of the story that you're going to talk about well in advance and then describe it, right? So these are the options. Use the past tense, simple past tense for something that's already happened and it's done in the past. And you want to use the past continuous for an event that's happening in the past and then something else happens at the same time. Okay. So when it comes to telling a story, storytelling, I've already told you, when it gets to your presentation in the second half of the semester, please keep these things in mind. Although I don't want you to tell a story, when you're doing a presentation, if you do add these elements of expression into your voice as you speak, that makes your presentation more interesting and keeps the attention of your audience. But in storytelling, it's essential. So you got something that triggers the series of events, and then these events need to be connected to each other, and that forms something called a plot. And then at the end, there has to be some sort of way of finishing it. In some cases, cartoons or, I don't know, animation, or usually in bad movies or bad books, there's a sudden ending, like it just says the end. And you're like, what happened? What happened to all the people? Like it doesn't feel like it's over. That means it doesn't have a resolution. But if you want to tell a good story, usually there's some kind of message at the end or something gets completed. You're going to have to think about what's going on in your story. So I need to know who is in the story, what is there, where, right? All these details need to be filled in as you tell your story. Who, what, where, when, why, and how are the question words in English that I basically want to know. As you tell your 2-minute story, all of those details should come through. And if I have questions afterwards, that means that your answer isn't as complete as it could be, right? So if there's some obvious things like, you didn't tell me if it was when you were young or when you were old or with your family or with somebody else, these things need to be told, okay? So let me give you a quick example that I think this always helps. If it's a memory of yours, that's the example I'm going to use, I think that's the best way to go, because most stories are not short enough for you to tell. Now, some of these are folk tales, right? Like the eagle and the tortoise story here. But you're certainly allowed to talk about something that you remember on your own. If you try to condense some sort of book or novel, you're not going to be able to tell me about the story. I don't want a summary, right? So I don't want you to talk to me about Harry Potter, right? And then tell me all the main characters and then explain to me that Harry Potter's friends overcome Voldemort at the end of the book and they fight the basilisk or something like that. That's just skipping the whole book and just sticking the main details. Really what I want you to do is pick a story that's really short and it's so basic that you can describe the whole thing. They have an African folktale about the eagle and the tortoise here, which is an interesting one. You can read that one over. There's folk tales about all kinds of different animals. There's a lot of famous Greek ones. If you want to do your own telling of a folk tale, that's fine. Or you can talk about something that happened to you when you're young. Okay? A memory of yours. So, excuse me. I'm just going to tell you a short little story of a memory because this would qualify too. So, how am I going to begin the story? I'm going to say, when I was young, I was in elementary school. I'm going to say I was grade 1, so 7 years old. I lived in a small town called Milton, which is outside of Toronto. And at the time, my favorite toy was Lego, in particular Space Lego. So it was approaching Christmas. It was probably a couple months before Christmas, and back then we used to make a wish list. So I wrote down the things that I wanted from Santa, my favorite toys. I gave it to my mother, and I was hoping she would buy this particular spaceship, this particular Lego spaceship. So, that was probably at the beginning of November, but I still had a couple months to wait. So I was having trouble sleeping, and I kept thinking about that toy. That's all I can remember that year. Time was going really slowly. And my parents in December usually go shopping, and then they come home and they tell us to, disappear for a little while, and then they hide the toys for Christmas in their bedroom. So knowing that, there was probably somewhere a hiding spot in her bedroom where I was not allowed to go. One time when my parents were not, in the house, they were outside doing something, I snuck into my parents' master bedroom, and I opened the closet and I lifted all the stuff that was covering the bags underneath, and I found this particular spaceship that had magnets on it, and it was really colorful. It had neon windows and everything. And I was so excited. I covered it up. My heart was beating. I shut the closet and I ran back out of my parents' room, and I didn't tell them. However, the next 2 or 3 weeks of my life were torture, because I knew it was there, and I couldn't touch it, and I couldn't talk about it, and I couldn't tell anyone. So that was so painful, those last 3 weeks. And then finally, Christmas morning came, and everybody woke up. And of course, we were like, Christmas morning, yay, Merry Christmas. And everybody sat down and took their presents. And Jeremy, here's your present. And I was like, oh, I wonder what it is. And I tore it open. I was like, oh, thank God, my spaceship. Finally, we're together. But I wasn't surprised at all. In fact, instead of being really excited for the last 3 weeks before Christmas, I was really anxious, and I was really uptight, and I couldn't sleep. So I loved that vehicle, but that actually was the last time that I tried to find my presents or know what my presents were before Christmas or my birthday. So to this day, this is about 30 years later, I think when I get a present from somebody, the most pleasant thing, the best thing for me is to get something that's surprising. So I'm not really concerned if it's the perfect thing for me or if it's the most beautiful thing, but I love the feeling of surprise. And I always, whenever somebody asks me if I want something for my birthday or Christmas, I always say, surprise me. So you see how that story works? It's a personal story, but it's still got the same kind of connected events. And, I'm the main character. There's my mom as a character as well. But I go through these events and this learning experience. And then at the end, there's a lesson. There's a lesson that you shouldn't go hunting for your Christmas presents beforehand, or you will ruin the surprise. That's generally how folk tales and old proverb tales and little myths work. So if you have a story like that, something that you learned or experienced in your own life, you can tell your little story like I did. A learning experience where there was a moral at the end. Or, just like the book, if you prefer to talk about, intelligent foxes, tigers, squirrels, eagles, rabbits, with personalities, or teaching things about how to behave in manners and bad luck and those sort of themes, that's up to you. So basically, tell a story. It's got to have a beginning. It's got to have some people doing things in a certain order, follow through with the events, and then have an ending which has some sort of meaning to it, like gives some sort of moral or lesson that people can take out of your story. And that is your assignment for next week. Now I know it is Chuseok, and you probably don't want to do your homework over the holiday. So I have a extended, not for you guys, but I've extended the cyber lecture for other people so they don't have to watch it over the holiday. So feel free to just hand it in on, you can hand it in on Tuesday. Monday, people, that'll give you an extra couple days to do your homework. So everybody can hand it. I actually have been putting the due date as every Tuesday because we have 2 classes on Monday and 1 on Tuesday. So let's just go with that. So every week, Monday classes, you can hand your homework in on Tuesday as well. Okay, and that'll give you an extra day after done with your holiday celebrations to hand in your homework. Okay, and that is it for this week's cyber lecture. As always, keep up with your work and keep handing in the assignments. And I hope you enjoy your holiday. I'll see you again next Monday. Take care.